Hello, my friend. Today, you are going to learn English, but not from a textbook, not from a grammar lesson. Today, you are going to learn English by talking about something real, something that millions of people feel every single day, but almost nobody talks about openly. Today's topic is social anxiety, and by the time this episode is finished, you will have learned real English, natural English, the kind that real people use when they talk about real feelings, and you will understand something important about yourself and about the people around you. But before we go any further, I want to ask you something personal. Have you ever walked into a room full of people and suddenly felt your heart beating very fast? Have you ever wanted to say something in a meeting, in a class, in a conversation with someone you admire, but something stopped you? Something inside you said, no, do not speak. What if you say the wrong thing? What if people laugh? What if they think you are stupid? Have you ever avoided a phone call because you were afraid of what might happen? Have you ever stayed quiet when you had something important to say because the fear of being judged felt stronger than the desire to be heard? If any of these things sound familiar, I want you to hear this clearly. You are not alone and you are not broken. What you are feeling has a name. It is called social anxiety. And today, we are going to understand it together. I know this feeling very well. When I was a young man, I felt it every single morning. I would ride my bicycle 40 minutes in the cold and the dark to reach a hotel where foreign tourists stayed. And every morning, before I walked through those doors, I stopped outside. My heart was beating fast. My hands were cold. A voice inside my head said, "Go back home. You cannot do this. Your English is too bad. They will laugh at you. They will not take you seriously. You do not belong here." I felt that fear every single morning. And every single morning, I walked through the door anyway. Not because the fear disappeared. It never fully disappeared. But because I made a decision that my goal was bigger than my fear. That decision changed my entire life. And today, I want to help you make that same decision for yourself. So let us start at the beginning. Social anxiety is a feeling of fear or nervousness in social situations. A social situation is any moment when you are with other people, talking to someone, going to a gathering, eating in a restaurant with strangers, speaking in a meeting, making a phone call, or even just walking into a room where other people are already sitting. For most people, these situations feel manageable. A little bit uncomfortable sometimes, yes, but something they can handle. For people with social anxiety, these situations feel very different. They feel extremely uncomfortable. Sometimes they feel completely impossible. The word anxiety means a feeling of worry, nervousness, or fear about what might happen. It is not just being a little nervous before something important. Anxiety is deeper and stronger than that. It is a feeling that is hard to control, that arrives without warning, and that can feel much larger than the situation that caused it. And when we add the word social, we are talking about this feeling specifically in moments involving other people. Social anxiety is not just in the mind. It lives in the body too. When a person with social anxiety enters a difficult situation, their body reacts in very physical ways. Their heart starts beating quickly, sometimes so quickly that they can feel it in their chest and hear it in their ears. Their hands become wet with sweat. Their face becomes hot and red. Their voice begins to shake. Their mouth goes completely dry and it becomes difficult to speak clearly. Some people feel like they cannot breathe properly, like the air in the room has become suddenly thin. And underneath all of these physical sensations is one overwhelming desire to leave, to escape, to go somewhere quiet and safe where nobody is watching. These reactions are real. They are not imaginary. They are not signs of weakness or failure. They are the body's natural response to fear. The brain detects what it believes is a dangerous situation, and it sends a warning signal to the entire body, prepare. Something bad might happen. The problem is that the brain sometimes cannot tell the difference between a situation that is truly dangerous and a situation that only feels dangerous. A meeting at work is not actually a threat to your survival, but for someone with social anxiety, the brain can respond to it as if it were. Why does this happen? There is not one single answer because social anxiety is different for every person, but there are some things that come up again and again when experts study it. The most common reason is the fear of being judged. People with social anxiety spend enormous amounts of energy thinking about what other people think of them. They replay conversations in their mind after they happen, searching for mistakes, They anticipate conversations before they happen, rehearsing every possible way things could go wrong. They carry a constant awareness of themselves, how they look, how they sound, whether they are saying the right thing, that most people simply do not experience. I understood this fear personally. When I started speaking English with tourists at the hotel, my grammar was wrong. My pronunciation was strange. Sometimes I said words that did not make sense in that context, and the person I was speaking to would smile in a polite but unmistakable way that told me I had made an error. In those moments, I had a choice. I could let the fear of their judgment stop me from speaking. I could decide that what they thought of my English today was more important than the person I was working to become. Or I could decide something different. I could decide that every mistake I made in front of another person was not evidence of my inadequacy, but evidence of my progress. That their opinion of my English today had no power over who I would be 5 years from now. Most mornings I chose the second option. But I want to be honest, it was never easy. Sometimes social anxiety comes from something that happened in the past. A moment of public embarrassment. A time when someone laughed at a mistake. A memory of being criticized or misunderstood in front of others. The brain stores these experiences very carefully. And the next time a similar situation appears, the brain sends an immediate warning. Be careful. Something like this happened before, you could get hurt again. This is the brain doing exactly what it is designed to do, which is protect you. But sometimes the protection becomes a prison. The warning system activates in situations that are completely safe, treating a normal conversation like a crisis. Some people are also simply more sensitive than others by nature. They think more deeply about social interactions. They feel emotions more strongly. They notice details that other people miss. This sensitivity is not a flaw. In fact, the very same qualities that make social anxiety so painful, the deep awareness, the strong feelings, the constant attention to other people, are often the qualities that make a person extraordinarily empathetic, creative, and perceptive. Social anxiety is not a character weakness. It is a human experience, a very common one. And it is something that can be understood and gradually, carefully managed. Now let me tell you how social anxiety actually changes the way people live, because this is important. At work or in school, a person with social anxiety might find it nearly impossible to speak in a group setting. They might sit in a meeting with a genuinely good idea, something that could help everyone in the room, and stay completely silent, not because they do not care, not because they are lazy or indifferent, but because the fear of saying something wrong, of being judged or dismissed, feels in that moment more powerful than the desire to contribute. Over time, this means their voice is never heard. Their ideas never reach anyone. They feel invisible in the very places where they most want to be seen. In friendships and relationships, social anxiety creates a painful kind of loneliness. A person might desperately want connection. They want friends. They want to belong. They want to be known by other people, but every social situation feels like a test they might fail. They avoid gatherings. They do not initiate conversations because they are afraid of saying the wrong thing. They sometimes cancel plans at the last minute because when the moment comes, the anxiety becomes too strong, and so they end up alone. Not because they chose solitude, but because the fear of social situations kept them away from the very thing they needed most. And for people who are learning English, for people like you, social anxiety and language learning are deeply and painfully connected. Think about what learning a language actually requires. It requires you to make mistakes in front of other people. It requires you to say words incorrectly and keep going. It requires you to ask for help when you do not understand. It requires you to look confused, to pause, to search for a word that will not come, to stumble through a sentence and arrive somewhere imperfect at the end. All of this requires a kind of vulnerability that for someone with social anxiety feels genuinely terrifying. I see this everywhere. A person studies English for years. Their reading is good. They understand grammar. Their vocabulary is growing. But the moment they sit across from a native speaker and that person begins to talk, everything disappears. The brain goes blank. The English that was there 5 minutes ago is simply gone. The mouth opens and nothing comes out, or what comes out is fragmented and strange and nothing like what was intended. This is not a language failure. This is social anxiety doing what it always does, arriving at exactly the moment when you need it least. And I want to tell you something about this with complete honesty. The only way through this fear is through this fear. There is no other road. You cannot wait until you feel confident enough. You cannot wait until your English is perfect. You cannot study your way to fluency from behind a closed door. The confidence does not come before the action. It comes because of the action. Every time you open your mouth and speak, even badly, even with a shaking voice, even with wrong grammar, something is built inside you, something small but real. And those small things accumulate. Over weeks, over months, over years, they become something extraordinary. So what can you actually do? I want to be clear that I am not a therapist. If someone has severe social anxiety that is significantly affecting their life, speaking with a qualified professional is always the right choice. A good therapist can help in ways that go far beyond what I can offer in a podcast. But I can share what I have learned from my own experience and from studying people who have faced fear and moved through it. The first thing is simply to name what you are feeling. When you are in a social situation and the anxiety begins, say to yourself, this is social anxiety. This is a feeling. And feelings, even very strong ones, are not facts. Just because you feel certain that everyone in the room is judging you does not mean they are. Just because you feel like you are about to say something embarrassing does not mean you will. The feeling is real. The story the feeling is telling you is often not. Learning to separate the feeling from the story, to say, I feel this, but that does not mean this is true, is one of the most powerful things you can practice. The second thing is to start with something very small. Not a speech in front of 100 people, not a perfect 30-minute conversation with a native speaker. Something tiny. Say good morning to one person you would normally walk past in silence. Ask one question in a setting where you would normally stay quiet. Send one message in English to someone you have wanted to contact. Make one short phone call instead of sending a text. These small actions build something called evidence, real, personal, lived evidence that you can do it. That the world does not end when you speak. That people are generally kinder and less judgmental than the anxious voice in your head suggests. The third thing is to change what you are trying to achieve. Most people with social anxiety enter social situations with one goal. Do not make a mistake. Do not embarrass yourself. Do not say the wrong thing. Say the right thing in the right way at the right moment, and then leave without having damaged anyone's opinion of you. This goal is exhausting. It makes every conversation a performance, and every mistake a failure. Try changing the goal entirely. Instead of do not make a mistake, try connect with one person today. Learn something from this conversation. Make one person feel heard. When your goal is genuine connection instead of flawless performance, your attention shifts from yourself to the other person. And when your attention is on the other person, the anxiety has less room to grow. And in terms of your English specifically, here are some phrases that are genuinely useful in the moments when social anxiety makes your mind go blank. When you do not understand something, you can say, sorry, could you say that again? Or I am not sure I understood. Could you explain that a little more? When you need time to think, you can say, that is a good question. Let me think for a moment. Or give me just a second. I want to make sure I answer properly. When you make a mistake, you can say, sorry, let me say that again. Or that is not quite what I meant. What I am trying to say is, and when you feel overwhelmed, you can simply say, I am sorry. I am feeling a little nervous today, because saying that out loud, naming the feeling to another person, very often makes it smaller immediately. Practice these phrases not when you need them, but before you need them. Say them out loud right now, wherever you are. Say them to yourself in the mirror. Say them to a friend. The more natural they feel before a stressful moment, the more available they will be during one. Let me close with something I want you to carry with you after this episode ends. Every person you admire, every confident speaker, every person who seems completely at ease in social situations, every person whose English sounds effortless and natural, every single one of them has felt fear, not sometimes, regularly. The fear does not disappear when you become successful or fluent or experienced. What changes is your relationship with the fear. You learn to recognize it without being controlled by it. You learn to walk through the door even when your hands are cold and your heart is beating fast. Social anxiety is real. The body sensations are real. The fear of judgment is real. The desire to disappear rather than be seen is real. But you are also real. Your voice is real. Your ideas are real. The connection you could build with another person through conversation, through broken, imperfect, beautifully human conversation, in whatever English you have right now, that is real too. I rode my bicycle to that hotel every morning for 9 years. Some mornings I felt something close to brave. Most mornings I felt afraid, but I always showed up. I always walked through the door. And every time I did, even when the conversation was awkward, even when I made mistakes that made me want to disappear, I became a little more of the person I was trying to become. That is all I am asking you to do today. Show up. Walk through the door. Speak even when your voice is shaking. Your English will get better. Your confidence will grow. And one day, sooner than you think, you will look back at where you started and you will not recognize yourself. That day is coming, but only if you begin today. Now I want to stay with you a little longer because there is more I want to share. There are things about social anxiety that most people never talk about. Not in textbooks, not in podcasts, not even in therapy sometimes. Things that are true and important and that I think you deserve to hear. The first thing is this. Social anxiety lies to you. It is a very convincing liar. It speaks in your own voice, which makes it difficult to recognize as something separate from you. When the anxiety says, nobody wants to hear what you have to say, it does not sound like a lie. It sounds like the truth. It sounds like something you have always known about yourself, but it is not the truth. It is a story the anxiety is telling, and like all stories, it can be questioned, examined, and eventually replaced with a different story, one that is closer to what is actually real. Here is a practice that I have seen change people profoundly. The next time you are in a social situation and the anxious voice begins, the voice that says you are being judged, that you are saying the wrong things, that everyone is watching and waiting for you to fail, I want you to ask one simple question. Is this actually true, or does it only feel true right now? Not to dismiss the feeling, not to tell yourself the feeling is wrong, but to create a small space between the feeling and the story, because in that space, you can make a different choice. You can choose to stay in the conversation. You can choose to speak the next sentence even though the voice is still there. You can choose to be present with the person in front of you rather than the argument happening inside your head. I also want to talk about something that does not get discussed enough, which is the relationship between social anxiety and perfectionism. Many people with social anxiety are also perfectionists. They hold themselves to an extremely high standard in social situations. Every word must be right. Every impression must be positive. Every conversation must go smoothly. And the moment something falls short of that standard, the moment they stumble over a word or say something that lands awkwardly, or feel like the other person is not responding the way they hoped, the anxiety floods in immediately. See, it says, you failed. You always fail at this. Perfectionism and social anxiety feed each other. Perfectionism sets an impossible standard. Social anxiety punishes every failure to meet that standard. And together, they create a cycle that becomes harder and harder to break. The only way to interrupt this cycle is to deliberately, consciously, and repeatedly lower the standard. Not to stop caring about how you communicate, but to accept that human communication is inherently imperfect. Every person you have ever admired, every speaker, every leader, every person whose confidence you envy says the wrong thing sometimes, stumbles over sentences, forgets words, tells a story that does not land the way they intended. This is not failure. This is conversation. This is what being human sounds like. And for those of you learning English specifically, I want to say something that I hope will stay with you for a long time. The English language itself is full of imperfection. Native speakers make grammatical mistakes constantly. They use slang that technically breaks the rules. They start sentences and do not finish them. They say and you know, and I mean, and actually, and basically, so many times that if you counted them, you would be shocked. The English that native speakers actually speak every day is nothing like the English in a textbook. And the gap between those two things, between textbook English and real spoken English, is something that only disappears when you spend time listening to real people speak in real situations. This is why the topic matters as much as the language itself. When you listen to a podcast about a topic that genuinely affects you, when you hear someone talk about fear, about loneliness, about the experience of feeling invisible in a crowd, your brain engages differently than it does when you are studying grammar. Emotion opens the mind. Relevance opens the memory. When something matters to you, when it connects to your own experience, you remember it. The vocabulary stays. The phrases stay. The structures of the sentences stay. And next time you want to express that feeling in English, the words are there, not because you memorized them from a list, but because you heard them in a context that was real and meaningful. So let me teach you some more of that language now. Let me give you the English that people actually use when they talk about anxiety and fear and the courage to keep going, because these are words worth knowing. When something makes you feel very anxious, you might say, this situation is really getting to me, or I am really struggling with this today, or honestly, this is harder than I expected. When you want to describe the feeling of wanting to escape, you might say, I just wanted to get out of there, or I had this overwhelming urge to leave, or I felt like the walls were closing in. When you want to describe the moment you pushed through the fear anyway, you might say, I was terrified, but I did it anyway. Or I took a deep breath and just went for it. Or I was shaking on the inside, but I kept going. These phrases are not formal. They are not textbook English. They are the real language of human experience, and they are extraordinarily useful. Because the goal of learning English is not to sound like a textbook. The goal is to be able to say what you actually mean in a way that another person can receive and understand and feel. And when you can do that, when you can take a real feeling from inside yourself and translate it into English words that land in another person's heart, you have achieved something that no grammar test can measure. I also want to talk about something that many language learners find very difficult, which is the silence, the pauses in conversation. The moments when you are searching for a word and the other person is waiting, and every second of that waiting feels like evidence of your inadequacy. Native speakers handle silence very differently from what most people expect. They are comfortable with it. A pause in conversation is not automatically a problem to be solved. It is sometimes just a moment of genuine thinking, and any patient person will give you that space if you simply signal that you are using it. You can say, just give me a moment, or I want to find the right word for this, or how do I say this in English? And suddenly, the silence has a shape, a purpose, a frame around it. It is no longer just emptiness. It is a person thinking carefully about what they want to say, which is something everyone respects. There is also something I want to say about the people who are patient with you while you are learning. In my 9 years of conversations with tourists at that hotel, the people who helped me most were not the ones who corrected every mistake. They were the ones who stayed in the conversation, who listened through the broken sentences, who responded to what I meant rather than how I said it, who made me feel in those small moments that what I had to say was worth the effort of saying it. Those people gave me something no grammar textbook could give. They gave me the experience of being understood. And being understood, even imperfectly, even partially, even with mistakes on both sides, that is what language is for. If you are someone with social anxiety, I want you to think about this. The connection you are afraid to reach for, the conversation you have been postponing, the relationship you have been keeping at a distance because the fear feels too large. Someone on the other side of that connection is also waiting. Maybe they are less anxious than you. Maybe they are more, but they want to be known just like you do. They want to feel understood just like you do. And the conversation that your anxiety is telling you is too dangerous might be exactly the conversation that both of you need. I have watched people transform through language, not slowly, not gradually, but sometimes in a single moment, a single conversation where something clicked, where the fear was present and they spoke anyway, where the words came out imperfect and the other person understood and responded with warmth, and something shifted permanently inside that person. I cannot promise you that moment will come in the next conversation you have, but I can promise you that it cannot come if you keep waiting for the fear to disappear before you begin. The fear is part of the journey. It is not the obstacle to the journey. Every person who has ever built something meaningful in language, in business, in relationships, in any area of human life did it while afraid. They just decided at some point that the thing they were building mattered more than the comfort of staying still. That is the only decision that separates the life you have from the life you want. Not talent, not luck, not the right circumstances, or the right moment, or the right level of English. Just that one decision, made again and again, every single day. So here is what I want you to do after this episode ends. Not tomorrow, today. Find one social situation, one conversation, one message, one phone call, one moment of connection that you have been avoiding because of fear. It does not need to be big. In fact, the smaller the better. Because small things done consistently are what build lives. Find that one thing and do it. In English, if you can. In whatever language you have, if you cannot. But do it. And when the fear arrives, because it will arrive, remember that the fear is not a stop sign. It is a signal. It means you are alive. It means you are growing. It means you are exactly where you need to be. Walk through the door every day, one door at a time. That is the whole secret. That is everything I know.